Morning, good
Good
afternoon. My
morning.
name is Robert Schmidt, and I'm also known as Mr. IoT. I am the Chief IoT Technologist for Deloitte with a deep passion for all things digital. This week on Coffee with Mr. IoT, I am talking with Elliott Hedman. Good morning, Elliot. How are you doing?
Good morning. Good morning. It's nice that I could put some time in to meet with you guys.
Oh, it's great to have you. Elliot, you are the founder and I guess you're running Empath. And I have to tell you, when I heard about you, I was super fascinated how you use sensors, like something really scientific, something really with hard data to judge emotions. Tell us about this. What is this about? How does this work? Can you tell me what my emotional state is?
Well, are you wearing my sensors? Well, I can tell you what your emotional state is because actually the best processor of emotions is humans. Because you're smiling right now, you're crouched forward on the TV, in front of the TV. There's over 200 ways that humans express emotional experiences. So yes, I think I can. But it's an interesting question. What happens when we tie some technology in there, when we can start measuring things the human eye can't perceive? And for my dissertation at the MIT Media Lab, I focused on what they call electrodermal activity. Some people know it as galvanic skin response or skin conductance. And we looked at how much you're sweating. Because it ends up, you change how much you're sweating all day long, and that directly relates to your emotional experience.
So you are measuring, your sensor measures my sweat levels. That's it.
Yep. Yeah, that's all that I actually need to measure. People keep telling me I should measure more, and I'm like, but I'm getting so much information off of the sweat that I barely have enough time to just even analyze all that, because your sweat, the micro changes, really tiny. You wouldn't be able to see these differences. It's tied to the sympathetic nervous system, and that's your fight or flight response. So if you're getting excited or if you're getting frustrated or anxious, we will see that. You can think of this as like, when your adrenaline's pumping or when your eyes are dilating. All those things we're able to measure with this sensor.
Well, so, if I would have had your sensor, your measurements would have been gone from really high stress to really low stress when you showed up right in time for the call.
Yeah. I was like, I got your guys' email, and I'm like, oh, I'm at a coffee shop. Let's see if I can figure this out. So I'm in the corner next to a power outlet. So it's great.
Well, it's sunny where you are. Where are you actually? Where are you
I'm
getting
actually in that Boulder, the Boulder area, Boulder, Colorado.
In Boulder. Okay, but the study you did was from MIT.
Yes, yeah. Our clients are all over the world. You guys probably know that about Deloitte style too. And so I could live wherever I wanted to. So I decided to live in sunny Boulder. But I spent 7 years in Cambridge and some time in Silicon Valley too. So I've earned my time here.
You've earned your time. I like that. That's a really great way of putting it. So Empath, I get it. You're measuring micro sweat levels, and that's so much information that gives you about this. So do you have one of those sensors with you so you can show it to us?
That would have been a good idea. I didn't know this was a video chat. So no, I don't have any sensor things, but it's actually really boring to look at. It literally looks just like a box. It's just a little box that we put on your wrists, and then we just have them wear it. Sometimes we put things onto their fingers as well because that gives us a better signal as well.
And so is this something I wear all the time? Is this something I just wear when I'm talking to you?
Yeah.
What's talk to me about the practical usage of this, and how do you use it with companies?
It depends on what your goal is, right? So a lot of companies have this vision of people will wear this 24/7 and will know all their emotional experiences throughout the entire day. And then I tell them, you know how much data that is? You know how hard it would be to interpret this? And this is, brace yourself, because I know this is a little different than most computer scientists think about this data, is that I can put a sensor on a shopper for 30 minutes, and it could take me like 2 weeks just to analyze that 30 minutes of data because it's so rich with information. So I tend to lean towards very tiny little bits of data. I know we're in this big data revolution, but I can look at, it might take you only 5 minutes to buy a vacuum, but then I can interview you about the data I got for 2 hours on those 5 minutes. So I tend to put the sensor on a person, have them do whatever activity I'm interested in, and then we break it down and we look into really tiny details about what's going on there.
So is measuring shopping experiences one of your actual use cases? The
Yeah, that
practicality?
was the one that people jumped on immediately when we started Empath out. So we've helped lots of different companies. Like, how do we make this retail space so people are excited and engaged? How do we make it so employers want to be here, and that the customers like to be with the employers? So those kind of things are kind of standard. But now we've really ventured off of that because I kind of solved that one. That was easy. And now I want to do something harder. So now we're looking much more into things like, how do we make it so kids at the Boys and Girls Club who have been taught to hate reading, how do we make it so when they're using a digital program, they like to read? Or how do we make it so when people are using interactive TV, how do we make it so that they're excited and they want to be there? So we're playing with more complicated emotions right now.
So if I'm hearing this right, this is all about measuring experiences. People put all kind of new experiences together, and you are giving them a tool to actually measure their emotional response to that. Is that a fair summary?
I think that's about half of what we do. I think we naturally measure emotional experiences even if we don't use sensors because we all have a goal. Like, we don't make a new retail space without having an idea of what emotional experience we want in there. So part of it is measuring it. And then the other part is holding ourselves accountable to the experience we want to create. So like, let's take, for example, when I was doing one retail space, I always use blenders because I've never worked on blenders, but I can talk about blenders. Is that, let's say you want to create a new display to sell blenders. And you're like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make it so there's a digital kiosk to help sell these blenders. So that you already have an experience in mind, you already have a design, but what you're not doing is you're not measuring it. You're not actually validating, did you create that exciting experience with your digital kiosk? And so that's the second part of what Empath really focuses on is what I call a mototyping, which is, okay, we got this tool so we can tell you it's not working, but let's keep changing things up and let's keep making it different until we get that experience that you're going for. Like, how do we make it so that kiosk is actually doing what you want? Spoiler, kiosks are horrible. You should never make a kiosk. That's the answer to that one with those sensors. But so yeah, it's about holding yourself accountable and keep trying until you get it. It's not just, yep, you did it or you didn't do it.
That's awesome. If you're just joining us, I'm Robert Schmid, the Chief IoT Technologist for Deloitte, and you're watching Coffee with Mr. IoT. Today, I'm talking with Elliott Hedman about emotional IoT. Elliot runs and founded Empath, and we're talking about how to measure emotions with sensors. So, Elliot, I gotta say, one of the things that occurred to me, I was like sitting here and thinking, how would you use this? And the first thing that came to mind is that when you meet someone at work or even in your personal life, I'd like to know what their emotional thing is. So, I don't know, I immediately thought maybe this is something for speed dating, but that was just sort of...
Everyone always brings up speed dating. It's the #1 thing people talk to me about. I have brought it on one
I'm not that creative, then you're telling me.
No, you're creative. It's just interesting that people, like, that's where they want to immediately go. In fact, I've had an article written about me in this space, and I'm like, that's not what I do, but I know a lot about it. So, yeah, we have these emotional needs, right? Like, we want to understand how we're affecting the people around us, and as companies, we definitely want to do that. But also as human nature. But so like I've been working. I actually find that my dating stories are actually very similar to my helping kids with autism, because what we're really asking is, I don't know what's going on here, and I'd like to have some more clarification. I'd like to have some more data to help me tell the story about, is it working? What's going on? And what I found, okay, once again, this is probably going to go a little bit different than most IoT things, is that actually the best thing about these sensors in these spaces is that they provide space for a conversation. So I'll give you an example of a date. I had my date wear it while we went to a classical concert. She was like, oh, cool, I'll come with you. And it was fun. It was in Miami. And she wore the sensor, and we got all her data. And, and then we looked back at the data, and what I saw from the data was that she was really bored. Like, it was not a good concert for her. A classical concert can do that. And so what we were able to do is we were able to have a conversation about it. It's like, okay, it looks like you were not paying attention. It looks like you kind of drifted off here. And she's like, she did. She's like, yeah, I did. Like, I was kind of falling asleep at that point in time. And so what was really cool about that moment is that we were able to have a conversation about an emotional experience that she might have been aware about, but it's really hard to be like, as a guy, I can't be like, I noticed that you were kind of bored. What, you want to talk about that? But we can talk about the data and be like, what do you think happened here? And she can kind of own that, and we can talk about it in a way that's not so accusatory or me like making assumptions, because it's like it's her interpretation, not my interpretation. So that was a really cool story, and I find that even with like in retail customers or with my kids is that when you're doing the research, it allows people to have conversations that they couldn't have before.
So I have to say, one, I've never talked about scientific dating on the show, but I have to. My thought on this is, wow, it's amazing that someone on a date would put on a sensor from you. So congrats.
That was a good indicator. That was a good indicator that this relationship might work.
Are you still with her?
No, she moved to California and started a startup. I was like, no, don't leave me. But it was a good date.
So I want to go back to the autism kids, and you mentioned this in passing, but I'm actually curious about this. I often talk about the human impact of IoT, and I love human stories. So I'd be curious to hear more about that.
Yeah, so I'll give you the story about how I started my whole company, kind of on accident. So I was at MIT. It was really, really hard, and it was near the winter break, and I'm from Colorado. And so we had these occupational therapists were there, and I was like, oh, wait a second, I'll just go work with the occupational therapists, because then I can go snowboarding on the weekends, and that will be a nice break from MIT. So that was my mindset going into working with the occupational therapists and kids with autism. I just want to clarify, this is where discoveries happen. And so I go to this occupational therapy place. It's called the Star Center. It's actually one of the top occupational therapy places in all of the United States. I had no idea. I knew nothing about this space. And I get in and I put the sensors on a kid. He doesn't have autism, but he has sensory challenges, much like a lot of kids with autism does. And we put the sensors on him, and he's walking up this rock wall. It's like 7 feet high, and he's up there, and I'm seeing it, and he is peeking. He's stressing out because he has a fear of heights, and you can see all this data just like, vroom. Oh boy, you just freaked this kid out. And then he like comes down, and he tells the therapist, I'm bored. I'm hungry. Can I get something to eat? I'm just bored. And he doesn't want to be in therapy at all. And so the therapist interprets this kid's I'm bored as he must need more stimulation. We must need to get him more excited. Even though I'm like, my sensors have to be broken because he's not bored according to my sensors at all. He's at the highest I've ever seen. So she takes him and puts him on a zip line, and it's even higher now. And then after the zip line, he's like, I'm just so bored. Can I get something to eat? And the therapist looks to me and says, Elliot, I bet he must be so low right now. And I'm like, actually, it's kind of the opposite. He's the highest I've ever seen. And then this is where the therapist is just brilliant. Like a light bulb goes off in her head and says, oh my God, this is what he's doing to cope with being overwhelmed. So what ended up happening is because he was so overwhelmed, the way he deals with it is he says he's bored, which is a horrible way of dealing with it, but that's his strategy. And so he's saying he's bored so he can get out of it because he doesn't want to be there anymore. And he's saying he's hungry because he has an oral fixation. If he chews on things, it actually helps him calm down. So the therapist took him into a calm room, gave him something to eat, and his sensor data went all the way down. And I was like, holy cow, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. How in the world did that happen? And that's where I started my company. I'm like, what else can I learn with this tool?
That's awesome. I actually now I'm one day when I'm in Boulder, I come to Denver actually quite a bit. I want to stop by and I want to sit there with you and try this out and see what you find.
It is so much more fun whenever I can do a show where someone actually has a sensor on. It's hilarious because everything I talk about, I will see what you're reacting to. Like that was the thing I was excited about. Oh, apparently when I started talking about dating, that was the thing you cared about more than anything. Like I can show you this kind of thing.
So, can I fake it?
Can you fake wearing the sensor? Yeah. So,
no, I'm not wearing the sensor. Can I? Okay. I'm not. Can I fake reactions? Can I fake you out?
Fake an emotion. Right. So these sensors are the same as lie detectors. I always like to tell people I put lie detectors on small children for most of my living. Yeah, so it's the same technology as lie detectors. Lie detectors have a few more pieces to it. But you probably have heard like all the ways to cheat a lie detector, and it's very true.
I have not.
So we'll also put on this talk show how to beat a lie detector, just in case you're ever in that situation. So yeah, you can fake it. Emotions, you cannot, emotions are complicated things. What is an emotion? I'm not measuring emotions, I'm measuring sweat, right? So there are ways to make it so you start sweating that are not anything to do with your emotional state. For example, you could breathe really hard. You could start talking, like physically talking creates a reaction. You can step on a thumbtack. You can think about something that really makes you excited, but that actually might be excitement in itself. So yeah, the sensors in themselves don't tell you the whole story. And, you know, I'd be interested in what you guys find in these other IoTA things, because most of the times when I tell people this, they're like, okay, so we need to measure other sources. We need to get their facial expressions, and we need to get their posture, and we need to get all these things, and then we'll know if they're lying or not. And I'm like, or, you know, you could also use common sense, because most of these things I can detect really easily. Like, if a kid stands up and I see a large reaction, then I just know not to look at that reaction. So it's actually pretty easy to get around these problems, but there are things that make it so that you need an expert in the room to interpret the data. You can't just put it on someone and be like, yep, I know all the data correctly.
Elliot, you talk about how you didn't know anything about autism. You talk about like you went to MIT to do this, and then you have all this emotional intelligence in you. You know, I mean, it started with me saying, how do you know how I feel emotional? And you said, well, you're leaning forward and you're doing this and you're doing that. That shows me you're engaged. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's very observatory. Where do you get all that? You don't learn this at MIT Tech Lab.
No, well, actually, well, first off, to start off with, my advisor, Roz Picard, she was actually, she's in a affective, starting with an A, which means emotional. She's like in the emotional computing group. So I did have an advisor who cared a lot about this, but you are right. It was kind of ironic to learn about emotions at MIT. I was kind of on a quest after that first story I showed you, and I spent a lot of time meeting with a lot of people in a lot of different spaces to figure out how to do this. The people who taught me the most were that there's multiple professors, not at MIT, but at all the schools around Boston, like Boston College, Northeastern, Harvard. And these sensors are kind of like key that got me into any conversation I wanted to. So I learned a lot from experts outside the field. And so I'm like, I'm the tech guy. Can you teach me the emotion side? And we kind of work together. So you're correct that by no means did I learn this just from an engineering class, but I actually learned it from some of the top people in the field who really ask these questions every day. Really freaky questions. You start asking, am I sad? Do I actually feel sad now? What does sadness mean? It's fun to ask those things.
Interesting. So where are you gonna take Empath? What's your next big endeavor with all this data? It sounds to me like you just scratched the surface. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. I'm actually in a weird role right now in that we have to say no to most of our clients, which is really weird. I'm like, nope, we don't have time. We can only do one project at a time right now. And you know, there's a question about whether I want to grow or not, and I've been going up back and forth on that. But I can tell you my own personal vision and what I care about, which might not resonate with everyone who's listening, but it is what I care about, so I will talk about it. And I just found, so I was working on this one project about selling makeup, and I didn't care about it. Like, what I found was, like, you know, women, they want to be like, they want to buy something in the moment, kind of like almost a slot machine. And I'm like, I don't care about making that experience, even if that's the experience you want. That's not important to me. So I still do retail once in a while, but you have to really yank my leg to do retail. And I wanted to do something that's meaningful for me. And this actually goes back to my autism work. And what I have found is that there's an entire population of people who don't have a voice, and those are kids. Those are the children out there. People are not listening to them. Our entire education system is kind of built around not what kids want or need, but it's because no one asks the kids. We treat kids kind of as prisoners. They kind of have to do the thing we want to do. But then I found out, oh, not only is this an education problem, our retail spaces aren't designed for kids. Our products that we design for kids aren't designed for kids. So that's actually been my real passion right now, is helping bring a voice to kids, because kids have needs also. In fact, a lot of times the kids have needs that are very similar to adults, but we just assume, oh, you don't need what adults need. It's like, no, kids want to feel respected. They want to feel connected to their community. They want to have a sense of purpose. They have all sorts of needs and emotional things that engage them. And when you get a kid engaged, you just feel so good about yourself. You're like, this is great. I'm letting this kid live a life fully. but it's a space that hasn't been explored at all yet. So right now we're focusing heavily on how do we help organizations understand the children's perspective. And the tools work out really well, because if you interview a kid, they will not tell you how they feel. They're not aware themselves about how they feel. So you really have to come up with some innovative ways of how to understand how kids are feeling.
That's awesome, Elliot. I could talk to you for another hour, and I'm sure we'll keep going from there. I want to close with one last question. Do you have kids?
No, I'm currently available. If anyone on this happens to live in Boulder, reach out and we'll put you in contact. No, I'm looking for one day having kids, and I've worked with hundreds of parents, and I'm looking forward to that day, because parents have a really incredible job and they have an incredible impact on their kids. A parent will impact the sensors more than anything else I've ever tested. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I texted with my youngest son. He's 18 yesterday. I wanted to talk to him about something about Sunday, so I will call him soon after this call today when I have time. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for sharing with us. I'm glad we got to talk. And yeah, any closing thoughts from you before we close the show?
Yeah, I think if you're an organization or a company that's saying, finally, I have a way of understanding my customers, and it's got to be through sensors, you're down a horrible path. Because you have the ability to understand your customers. I've worked with many retail companies who've reached out to me for this exact reason. There are many ways to understand your customers outside of sensors, and the fact that you think sensors will solve it means that you're down a horrible path. And I really do believe technology is a good way of helping make a good culture even better. But if you think you're going to use neuroscience to understand customers, you can, but you also need to be empathetic. You need to have an open heart, an open mind, a curious mind. You need to care about your customers at the first part. So I really recommend, and I'm happy to talk to anyone who thinks that way, but technology is a thing that enhances the empathy we already have. It doesn't replace the empathy if it's missing.
I love it. Technology enhances our empathy we already have. It doesn't replace it. I'm going to put that somewhere in my own personal memory bank, because that was a great close for the show.
Great.
Elliot, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You were watching Coffee with Mr. IoT, and if you enjoyed this conversation but missed part of it, please come and check out my YouTube channel. There's all recordings of today and past shows. And please join me again next week, Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, for another Coffee with Mr. IoT. And with that, bye, Elliot. Have a good one. Thank you.
Thank you, Dad. See ya.